It may be impossible to understand where a monk fits in today's world. Monks go against the grain of modern life. They occupy a mysterious place, somewhere between fear and fascination. At Mepkin Abbey, near Charleston, South Carolina, 30 Roman Catholic monks live in a community of prayer and work. They are on a spiritual journey that struggles to accommodate a rapidly changing world. They are Trappists. The history of Christian monks goes back 1,700 years. Their story is shrouded in myth and obscurity, but how they have survived 17 centuries holds some lessons for the modern world. About 700 Christian monasteries exist today. 100 are in the United States, and 17 of those are Trappist. Trappists have tried to preserve the strict lifestyle of early Christian monasteries, following a code that was born in the ruins of the Roman Empire. To an outsider, the Trappist life is a shock. They wake every day at 3 a.m., worship together 7 times a day, eat a strict vegetarian diet, and spend much of their time in silence. Their rule requires that they never marry, never have children, and leave their families behind.
I can see it right now. We were all sitting on the porch, and I'm the oldest of 4. I told my family that I was going to a Trappist monastery. Well, my mother had no idea what this meant, so she turned to my father and said, "Well, what does this mean?" And my father, without skipping a beat, said to my mother, "That means we'll never see him again."
It was very difficult for my mother. My mother's belongs to another Christian community, and at one point, right before I left, she said, "Do you want me to refuse you, to forbid you to do it?" And I said, "If you do, I'll leave at 21.
But I knew I had to do this. I knew within myself that God was calling me to do this. And at that point, I made a decision about who I was to be for the rest of my life, and not just being a monk, but being me.
My father, he experienced it as a rejection of himself. And so my father wrote me off when I entered the monastery. I was his firstborn, and he wanted me to go into the business with him, and for him it was a rejection. For me, it was, this is the way I was raised, to do what I felt called to.
I went to Benedictine High School. It was a military school. I dated, I was the manager of the basketball team. But there was this other thing that was just kind of always there, and it became kind of the driving force in my life.
The hardest time was my first 3 weeks here, because it was the first time I was ever away from home. I was homesick for a girlfriend. After that first 3 weeks, I've never really thought of leaving.
Their day begins not with a race against the clock, but with 5 hours of prayer, song, and meditation. It begins in the dark at 3 a.m. with a quiet service called vigils.
We start most vigils with Psalm 95. If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts, when it is quite hard, quite resistant at that time of the morning. But if you can break open your heart, then all the unseen things of humanity just come flooding in. And you walk outside in the river in the dark, and you can hear a symphony of sounds. The ancients could tell the time of night by the feel, the smell, the temperature, and the stars. That kind of sensitivity is what we try to develop, and it makes all the difference between a contemplative life and some other kind of life.